Good to see y'all. It has been a nice day. So grateful for good weather like this, but it is wonderful to get to come together. And do want to remind y'all, next week we won't have evening service because of fellowship, Thanksgiving fellowship, but I invite everybody to Thanksgiving fellowship. I've heard we're going to have smoked turkey. We may end up with some oven roasted turkey. Somebody wants to fry turkey. I'm not going to say no. And here's the thing. With no evening service, I'm sure some of us will go home, and because we had turkey, you know what we're going to do? Take a nap. It's just natural. Yes, it's exactly what happens. So we'll look forward to that fellowship and time. So I look forward to seeing y'all next Sunday and having that. But no evening service next Sunday. God willing, evening service for the Sunday after. But we're back in Luke chapter 7. We're going to be looking at verses 11 through 17. We go from the centurion servant to Jesus raising the son of the widow at Nain. And it probably would be more like Nain from a Hebrew standpoint, Nain from more of a Greek standpoint, but nonetheless, it's an interesting name. Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain. And many of his disciples went with him in a large crowd. Now, by this point, Jesus is already probably getting into that, close to that year of popularity. He's going to be extremely popular for a while. We have the year of obscurity. Who is this guy? The year of popularity. We all want to be his friend. And then the year of opposition. None of us like this guy. You know, it's kind of that way of his ministry would go. And by the way, those aren't exact years because one's more like 10 months, the other one's more like a year and a half, and other one's, it's just, we generally refer to it like that. Year of obscurity, year of popularity, year of opposition. When he came near the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the city was with her. Now, I want to stop there to fill in a little bit of the background to help us explain. He comes up to the gate of the city. Remember, many of these cities, most of them, would have had walls around them. For obvious reasons of protection, especially in times of siege and such. And where the gates are is an important barrier. That's going to be where a lot of commerce is done. That may be where some will gather together to do judicial decisions or just make agreements. But also it does demonstrate a barrier between where people are living and outside of where people are living. Why is that important? A person's not going to be buried inside the city gates. They're going to be buried outside because that body's unclean. And so they would take it to a place where the body would naturally decompose. It's interesting. It says that when he came near the city gate, behold, a dead man was being carried out. Now, I've heard some kind of indicate this was a young boy. It's a man. It's a man. His mother only has one son. Now, that does not mean she didn't have daughters. But in their culture, when a daughter would leave home to marry a man, she kind of became part of that family. That doesn't mean the ties were broken as much as the parent cannot rely on them to take care of them. Remember, they don't have Social Security. They don't have nursing homes. They don't have assisted living centers. They had children, all right? Particularly, sons did that job. This is her only son, and he's died. So this means, number one, who's going to take care of her? Number two, now she is going to be socially dropped down multiple notches. Now, without a son, and without a living relative that can take care of her, she is now in a lower class of social area. Now, you and I may go, that doesn't make sense. It was the culture of the time. It doesn't have to make sense. It's just the way they were. There are places in the world today we can look at and go, that doesn't make sense. That's just the way they are. Might I add, I think it's important that if we read the Old Testament, and if they read it correctly, if there's no one to take care of the widows, the community's supposed to help in that. A natural love for sisters should come about. But as we also find out from the Old Testament, Israel was not very good at this thing, right? How often does God say, I am angry, you have hurt the widow and the orphan. I will bring judgment upon you for such. And so her situation is actually very difficult, very bad. She's lost her son, but there's also a lot of specific things that are going to be referenced to her. Whether or not it's fair, it's just the way it was. As it goes on, it says that with this large crowd that was with her, verse 13, when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her, "Do not weep." Now, Jesus demonstrates compassion many times in his ministry, doesn't he? Luke does not bring it up as much as Matthew and Mark do. And John, he brings it up a little bit more, actually. Jesus had compassion. Some want to make him out to be a bleeding heart. Others want to make him out to be stone cold, and neither is really true. I think that's very important to say. There are some that want to say, well, Jesus was so loving, he would be okay with anything. You've not read much about Jesus. He gets in some people's faces if he has to. But he's always willing to forgive. He's always loving. He's always teaching. Love doesn't always have to mean agree. But nor is Jesus so harsh that he hated all people. It wasn't like that at all. He didn't hate anybody. Jesus was perfect. And so it's rather interesting. Luke's demonstrating here or a recording of Jesus having compassion is interesting. It's a show of emotion. Jesus had emotions. He gets rather irritated with his disciples sometimes, don't he? But by the way, since the disciples are mostly teenagers, let me ask you this. Would you get irritated with a bunch of teenagers? I would. I see Sister Lexi going, mm-hmm. She's like, they are my kind. I know how they are. And so you can understand that. Jesus is not always happy with his half-brothers. All right? Jesus gets saddened by the way that people have a lack of faith or the way people treat one another. But he also gets angry at wrong teaching and abusing and misusing and using people versus helping people. Jesus has emotion. He sees her, he knows her situation, and he has compassion. I like to look at it this way. The word here is a verb. Compassion is not a mere feeling, it's an action word. You can feel for someone, and then you can act for someone. Jesus acts on her behalf. He had compassion, and he said to her, "Do not weep." And the idea of this is stop doing what you're doing. They're in the process of weeping. Now, I want to remind you the way that they did their funerals is exactly different than the way we do ours. All right? Our Western mindset, especially in America, maybe in the southern part, we have a certain way of doing it. Let me tell you, just the ones I've been a part of, the ones I've seen, there is oftentimes crying, but it's meant to be controlled. You're not meant to lose control. The concept is you're supposed to hold it together. When you get home, you let it out. Maybe have some family there with you. We don't want everyone to see the emotions that are boiling inside of us. We want to have things in a specific order. We want people to maintain that order. Theirs was almost the opposite. But it wasn't because it was crazy. It was a certain cultural way of expression. They were much more expressive with their emotions than we are in certain regards. And so they expected crying. If there's no crying, that person was ungodly because no one loved them. If there is no weeping, and we're not talking about, we're talking about, we're going to go, okay, over dramatic, but for them, it's appropriate. So we got to reach back to this time period and recognize that the culture is just different than ours, and we got to deal with that. We can't look at them and judge them. We got to realize that's how they did it. They're going to express that. It was normally understood that people would come, and some people would even be hired in order to demonstrate the sadness. Now that's definitely different than what I can expect, but hey, that's what they did. And so she's not simply crying, she is lamenting, she's wailing. Now imagine this, imagine you're told not to hold it back. Let it out. We want you to let it out. We're going to let it out with you. Of course you're going to have a chorus of people wailing because they're brokenhearted. Now almost certainly he has died within the past 24 hours. This isn't 3-4 days later. All right? They buried their dead quicker. There were religious reasons, or some of it was a little superstitious, but there were religious reasons, but there's also practical reasons. Very few people were going to be embalmed or anything like that, and so they're going to take them. What's the purpose? The purpose isn't to keep the skin on the bones. The purpose is for the skin to go off the bones as quickly as possible over time, so that way they can take their bones and put them in what's called ossuaries, bone boxes. Now an ossuary is about this size to this size to this size. So everything, you may say, it can't fit in there. Oh, it can. It's just not going to have any skin on it. And so they would put them in caves, tombed caves, where they would put rocks or actually kind of cut round stones in front of them. And most of these caves were limestone. What does lime do to flesh? It speeds up the decomposition process. And so they're taking this body out of the city. They're wailing, and Jesus has compassion, and he tells her to stop the wailing. Now that may sound strange. You almost may think that right there is actually offensive. Jesus isn't being offensive. He's about to give her the greatest gift that she's known in her life. Then he came and he touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. Now, the situation is going to be a little interesting. You have all these people wailing and coming out, and just everything's going on, and then Jesus says, "Stop wailing, stop crying out." And you can almost imagine people, sniffles here. You can imagine people looking strange. And Jesus goes over to this. And when it says open coffin, that's a very interesting translation. It refers more to a wooden stretcher. He's not going to be buried with this to cover him. It's carrying the body to the tomb. And Jesus goes over and touches it. Touching that would ceremonially make him unclean. But you know the crazy thing about Jesus? He can't be made unclean. He makes other people clean and alive. And this dead young man is raised from the dead. And it changes everything. He says, "Young man, I say to you, arise." He gives a command. Now, when we think of Jesus raising the dead, oftentimes our first thought is Lazarus. I want you to know that was not the only person he raised from the dead. Although the situation, the time limit, it was probably the most memorable of such instances. But when Jesus told Lazarus to arise in where that tomb was, you have the joke, and it's not true. God can control his power perfectly. But you know, some say, why did he say Lazarus arise? Because if he just said arise, they would have all come from the grave. That would actually be a lack of control, wouldn't it? But it sounds good, don't it? Jesus had control over his divinity and his power. And so when he tells him to arise, guess what? He arises. So he who was dead sat up and began to speak. He who was dead, that is identifying the individual. He who was dead sat up and began to speak. And he presented him to his mother. Let me tell you, that would be a day you'd never forget. Then fear came upon all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him went throughout all Judea and all the surrounding region. Now we'll look back at verse 16 and 17 again here in a second. I want to bring up two interesting things. I want to bring up a point, and then I want to bring up a story. The story I've wrestled with for a little while now, but the point is this: why Jesus does this a handful of times? Why doesn't he do it more often? Now that's the way we oftentimes think about. There are other people that are in need. Why wouldn't he do to all of them? We have to remember God has a plan, and God knows what's best. It may hurt us because our hearts may feel for everyone, but there are other people who had children die, but Jesus had compassion on this woman. Now, part of it was to demonstrate his power, part of it was to demonstrate his love, but think of it this way: Jesus knew her specific needs. Other people may have had children die, and they're going to get through. But this lady truly needed this. For you and I, we may say, that doesn't make sense. But wait a minute. What if you decide to help someone around the holiday season? You're going to pay for something. Why don't you pay for 20 of them? Well, number one, that's not in the cards. But number two, I know this person's needs. And I'm not saying they don't have needs, but I know this person's needs. And it's on my heart to help them. Are we wrong? No. We can't claim ourselves to have good intentions and then look at God and say, where's the good intentions? We have to recognize God is greater than us, number one. And number two, we are not better than he is. We have to be consistent within our reasoning. I know that's not a modern thing we like to do. Rules for thee, not for me. That's what we oftentimes say, right? And I think that is a wrong mindset, except when it comes to supper. Then and I am for my children rules for thee, and I want rules for me. Is that what we do? Try not to. But still, that's the joke. Now, here's the story that I want to give. I knew a deacon at the last church I pastored, wonderful man, and one of the greatest hearted individuals I've ever met in my life. He was also one of the most stubborn people I've ever known in my life. He had a heart condition. And interestingly enough, they say if you have a heart blowout, you're dead. He went to his doctor and they did tests, and he comes back and he says, I'm a cardiologist. I wrote a book on the heart. You have 2 heart blowouts. You should be dead right now. And he said, what hospital do you use? Well, I use the one over here. He goes, oh gosh. He said, there's one guy in the U.S. that does the surgery you need, and that's where he's at right now. And this doctor said, tell me there's not a God in heaven. Now, I wasn't there, but he swore by it, his family swore by it, and I'll tell you this, having had that surgery done on his heart, being alive as long as he did was amazing. He lived to about 90, but he had a bad habit of mowing the churchyard and his yard about every week. If it's 110, he's going to mow it. And for 3-4 days, he was feeling like he was going to die, and they'd always tell him, don't mow that yard, at least not that much, and he would do it anyway. I remember one time, Brother so-and-so, I'm going to come up and I'm going to mow the yard, okay? I'm going to help out. Oh, well, what time are you going to be there? I think I'm going to be there around 10. I get there around 9:35. He's already doing it, okay? He's stubborn. Now, why do I bring this up? He passed away a few years ago. Wonderful man. And something I'd never seen before. He sung at his own funeral. They taped a song for the purpose of playing it at his funeral. Okay, that's new to me. Nathan asked me, well, with that being said, are you going to preach your own funeral? Nah, no, probably not. No, I'm not going to do that. But sometimes you wonder, why did God save him then? Because he ended up dying anyways. Number 1, God has a plan. Okay? Number 2, God used him in that time period. And in that time period, people heard that story because he wanted everybody to know. It wasn't the fact that he lived and look at me. It was the fact that look at what my God did, because that is improbable to an extreme. Sometimes when God acts in certain instances, you may say, well, they're still going to die one day too. But they're being demonstrated right now for a reason. We're given more time with them for a reason. And instead of philosophically questioning every aspect of it, let's first of all realize that we should trust God. And second of all, be grateful. That doesn't mean we shouldn't ask questions, but it does mean that we should be grateful. And so this young man at some point is going to die anyway, but he was a recipient of God's gracious kindness. He was also given the opportunity to live again and take care of his mother. And Jesus was shown both for his compassion as well as his help. Those are powerful things. Now, bringing us to verse 16, 17, naturally, people respond. Then fear came upon them all. Now, the word for fear here is phobos. It's a Greek word in which we get our word phobia from. But I want you to realize the way we use the word is not entirely the way they use the word. Many centuries, actually 2,000 years have gone by, and so we have our own meaning for it. We have to look back, what did they mean by it? All right? It's almost like whenever you read something from, let's say, 80 years ago, and it refers to people being happy and gay, and today there may be an entire political thought process goes through your mind. That's not the way they meant it, okay? You may see something from back at that time, you go, oh my goodness, why would they say that? And it turns out it was actually a nice saying. There is a word for urinating that's actually very disgusting today, but back then it was a perfectly acceptable way of saying it. What does that tell you? Words change meanings over time. Might I add, 6, 7's going to change. Just give it time. It's going to change. Because I remember a young man that we had here that helped out, wonderful guy. He would say, Brother Jerry, that is lit. And I go, my brother, for my generation, that means something totally different than your generation. And he's like, well, it's the words now. I'm like, yeah, but when your kids are growing up, it's going to be different then. And it's just the way it works. Phobos had a positive and a negative connotation. The negative was actually a terror, a great fear of such that would give terror or pain or such worry that would frighten someone. So not entirely different than our phobias. There's connotations of difference there, but there was also a positive feature of it, where awe and respect and reverence would occur. Now, there's still fear, but can you fear someone but also not be terrified of them? Sure. I feared my father growing up, but I didn't think he was going to kill me. Ground for a year, maybe, that happened, but he wasn't going to kill me. I wasn't terrified in that way of him, but I was fearful of him, and I respected him. And sometimes the things he did surprised me and just caught my attention. This is the idea of what's going on here. It's a positive fear, because look what they do. They glorified God, saying a great prophet has arisen up among us, and God has visited his people. Now, why would they say these things? They have a Tanakh, an Old Testament, all right? And within that, they know about what God has done with their people in the past. They also know that God's not done a whole lot with them in the past several centuries. In fact, in the last 400 years, there's been no official revelation from God. There actually have been books that have been written. These are separated in what is today called two groups: the Pseudepigrapha, that stuff's really out there, and then you have the Apocrypha. A little more grounded, but it's still doesn't fully connect with the Old Testament, plus it doesn't fit the connotations of inspiration. They had reasonings on why they understood something to be from God and not. Now put it this way: if your favorite writer's not writing, you may feel like it's time to make your own fan fiction. That's what a lot of those writings really are. They're fan fiction. What does that tell you? They wanted to hear from God, so much so they tried to initiate it. Well, that ain't going to work. So they recognize God has not visited them in the same way. They long for the prophets. They long for the promises. What do they know about the prophets? The prophets spoke well. The prophets spoke warnings, information, good news. But also, several of the prophets, not all of them, several of them did miraculous works. Moses did miraculous works. Technically, Samuel did not as many that are noted, but there were some. The two that are most highly lauded, though, in this area would happen to be Elijah and Elisha. And there were some resurrections with relation to them. And so naturally, if this guy is doing something, and by the way, it's loving, it's kind, he's teaching the word of God from the Old Testament, so what are they going to say? He's a prophet. Is that true? Yes, but he's more than a prophet. But they're recognizing a prophet's among us. God's at work. And the second thing, God has visited his people. Some of the promises that are recorded in Isaiah speak of God visiting his people, helping his people, where the dead are raised. In fact, if you'll remember, we're not there yet, but it's going to happen, where John the Baptist is in prison. And John the Baptist sends some of his disciples, and they come to Jesus. And ask him, are you the one who is to come, or are we supposed to look for another? You may say, but John pointed straight to him. Yeah, but John knows he's about to die. Now let me ask you this. If God gave you a direct revelation and you have work to do and you're a little worried, would you wonder if you did your job right or not? John's worried that he hasn't done his job right. He's having a moment of doubt, and Jesus does not hate him for that or even speak badly. What does he tell his disciples? The blind see, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the gospel's being preached. You know where that all comes from? Isaiah, in specific areas. It's a mashup of several things from Isaiah that speaks of the servant of the Lord, that is the Messiah. So in other words, what does the scripture say and what are you seeing? There you go. Go tell John that. And that was apparently enough for John to feel good, to feel at ease. Well, God's visited this people. They don't get the full entailment of that, because it's not that God visited simply with a prophet. This prophet is more than a prophet. He is God in the flesh. They don't fully understand that, but can we be honest? None of us can comprehend what all that entails. But they recognize this is something from God. This report about him went out throughout all Judea and all the surrounding area. Now, he's already been doing miracles. He's already got great teaching, and people know about it. But every time something of this magnitude occurs, more people hear, because wouldn't you want to hear about that? Whenever something horrible occurs in America, we're going to hear pretty quickly, aren't we? Because we are a bad news kind of people. By that I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's bad news, we want to hear about it. Do you know, every now and then I'll see reports, I'll see articles of something good that happens, and it's not highly recognized or lauded. You know why? Because we are something of a pessimistic people. Now, I don't think we ought to be optimistic, because when you see the world that's around us, it's hard to be optimistic about our world, isn't it? But I think we ought to have hope in Jesus Christ. And so when we look at good in this world, we're reminded that our God is still at work, even when we're not seeing it every day. And so they live in a world of such bad news in their culture that good news spread very quickly. What do we know about Jesus? Jesus has compassion. Both there, he has compassion now for all people. These specific instances tell us about Jesus. Also, we see that in their situation, God acted. We recognize that sometimes we don't understand why God acts here and not there, but God has his reasons. Every now and then I do know that my children are like, why did you do that for my sibling but not me? Now, sometimes we may have felt like it, but sometimes we actually have a legitimate reason. Because I know what's going on there and you didn't need it. They don't see it in that moment. They're in their own world right there, and they're not seeing the broader picture. But we as parents and grandparents, we can see a little bit further. God sees all the way, and so he knows specifically. Sometimes we're wondering, what was the point? It was great and wonderful, but they were going to die anyways. So you might know that God cares, so that you might be given more opportunity. My great-grandmother, I was extremely close with her, and 2 times, it's one of the interesting things, 2 times she told me, she called me Little Jerry. I was named after her youngest son, who's my great-uncle, and he is much taller and everything. But she said, Little Jerry, anything you want in this house, let me know, and I will put your name on it. It's yours. Now, for a lot of people, that's a perfectly good opportunity to take advantage. Both times, with witnesses, my answer was, and it's not because I'm the greatest person in the world, because I'm not, I just want more time with you, Grandma. And I got 3 more years. My God gave me 3 more years. I would have loved more time, but you know what? I got to talk to my grandma. As much as there are things in that house that would have been interesting to have or to remember, I got to see my grandma hold my son and my oldest daughter. I got to see my grandma talk about faith. I got to see my grandma show happiness and love. Get a little cranky at times too, which was not normal, but hey, she had every ability to, and we all do. But I don't know, in that moment I realized that stuff didn't matter. The time with her mattered. So when we wonder why did God let us gives us more time, that's a grace that we should be grateful for. Any questions or comments? Did I go longer tonight than this morning? Do we need to flip that or something? I don't know. Well, once again, we're having fellowship, Thanksgiving fellowship. I'm going to call it that, Thanksgiving fellowship next Sunday. Looking forward to that. And we're getting ever closer to both Thanksgiving and Christmas. Now, might I add, as Christians, Thanksgiving should have a special meaning for us. I know the history of it in America. We also know what happened afterwards, and a lot of people talk here. I like what one guy said in a movie. It was a movie. He said, yeah, things didn't always work out after that, but he said, there was this moment. And we take those moments and we look at them and we try to follow the good ideas of those instead of dwelling on what bad has happened. I'm like, oh, yes, I like that. But as Christians, if anybody should be grateful and thankful, we need to be. Because we know the love of God, and we should be thankful. And we should try to express that to other people. Christmas is coming, and might I add, no matter when Jesus was born, I actually am among the few that believes it was right around that time period. Not that exact night, probably, but that time period. I think that's probably accurate historically, but yeah, I'm in the minority. Doesn't matter. We're celebrating the birth of Jesus, not with what he could have been, but with what he was to do and did do. So Christmas means so much to us. So if you're going to give a gift to someone, I want to remind you the greatest gift was Jesus Christ. And you have every reason to give gifts because we have been given the greatest gift of salvation in our Lord and Savior. As we stand and get ready to dismiss,